The moment my father's new wife smiled while sliding a thick legal envelope across the polished conference table, I realized she believed the battle was already over. Before it had truly begun, every relative in the room looked at me with pity, as if I had become another helpless victim of a carefully planned family takeover. But they could never imagine that the biggest secret in our family had been protected for years and was waiting for the perfect moment to change everything. My name is Claire Harrison. I am 30 years old, and I work as a disaster response coordinator where remaining calm during emergencies is part of my everyday life. Yet, nothing in my career prepared me for watching greed quietly destroy the people I loved most. While everyone expected me to react with anger after my father passed away, I stayed silent because I knew emotional decisions often help dishonest people while patience gives the truth enough time to reveal itself. My grandfather, Theodore Harrison, spent more than 4 decades building one of the largest commercial construction companies in the Midwest, creating a fortune that came from endless hard work rather than luck or inheritance. During one of our final conversations together, he explained that wealth attracts people who admire money far more than family, so he quietly created a protected legacy plan that would remain hidden until the day someone tried to take everything through manipulation instead of honesty. Everything inside our family changed after my father married Victoria Brooks, a woman with polished manners, expensive taste, and an incredible ability to convince people she cared deeply about them, even while calculating how every conversation could benefit her future. Over the following months, she slowly separated my father from longtime business partners, trusted advisors, and even close friends, leaving him surrounded only by people whose loyalty belonged to her. While I watched from a distance, promising myself that I would never expose my grandfather's final plan until the exact moment it became necessary. As the months passed, my father began struggling with serious health problems that slowly drained both his strength and confidence, and Victoria treated every setback as another opportunity to tighten her control over every important decision in his life. She insisted she was protecting him from unnecessary stress, but behind those carefully chosen words she quietly replaced experienced accountants, dismissed loyal employees, and handed complete authority to professionals who answered only to her. Whenever I called to visit, there was always another carefully prepared excuse explaining why my father needed more rest or why the doctors recommended avoiding emotional conversations, even though I knew he always looked forward to seeing me. Instead of arguing at the front door or creating a public family dispute, I accepted every rejection with patience because I understood that people driven by greed often become careless when they believe nobody is watching their actions. One quiet afternoon, I managed to speak with my father over the phone for only a few minutes while Victoria was attending a charity luncheon, and his voice sounded weaker than I had ever heard before despite his effort to remain cheerful. Before the call suddenly ended, he gently reminded me to remember everything my grandfather had taught us about protecting the family legacy, and although he never explained what he meant, his words confirmed that he still trusted the hidden plan waiting beneath the surface. Only a few weeks later, I received the heartbreaking call that my father had passed away peacefully during the night, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than anything I had experienced in my life. As relatives gathered to mourn his passing, Victoria accepted every expression of sympathy with dramatic tears and graceful smiles. But beneath her carefully performed grief, I could already see the quiet confidence of someone who believed an enormous fortune was finally within her reach. 3 days after the funeral, our entire family gathered inside the offices of my father's longtime attorney for the formal reading of his will, and the atmosphere felt cold enough to make every heartbeat seem louder than the last. Victoria arrived wearing an elegant black suit with an expression carefully balanced between sadness and confidence, while several distant relatives whispered among themselves, already assuming they knew exactly how the inheritance would be divided. As the attorney carefully reviewed each page, it became painfully clear that my father had signed several updated documents during the final months of his illness, leaving nearly every asset that stood in his personal name to Victoria. She received the family residence, several investment accounts, ownership of the operating companies, and nearly everything that appeared valuable on paper, while my name was mentioned only briefly before. The attorney quietly confirmed that I had received nothing from my father's personal estate. The room became uncomfortably silent as everyone turned toward me, expecting tears, anger, or an emotional confrontation that would probably end inside a courtroom. Before the month was over, instead, I thanked the attorney for his professionalism, closed my notebook, offered my condolences to everyone present, and calmly walked toward the exit without challenging a single word, leaving Victoria visibly confused because my silence did not match the victory she had. Imagine. Later that evening, several relatives called to ask why I had surrendered so easily after losing everything, and some even suggested that I had been too frightened to defend my own father's legacy. I simply thanked them for their concern, ended every conversation politely, and spent the rest of the night reviewing a locked collection of documents my grandfather had entrusted to me years earlier, knowing the real story had not even begun and that the biggest surprise was still waiting ahead. Less than a week after the will was read, the picture of Victoria's perfect victory began falling apart much faster than anyone expected, because the companies she had rushed to claim were struggling under years of hidden obligations that had never been obvious from the outside. Large business loans, overdue tax payments, expensive contract disputes, and mounting operating costs quickly arrived on her desk, replacing the excitement of becoming wealthy with sleepless nights filled with growing panic. Convinced that valuable assets had somehow disappeared before my father passed away, Victoria became obsessed with the idea that I had secretly hidden millions of dollars beyond her reach, and she hired one of the most aggressive corporate attorneys in the state to help her recover what she believed belonged to her. Together they built a complicated legal strategy designed to pressure me into revealing financial records, hoping fear alone would force me to surrender information that did not actually exist. One rainy afternoon, my peaceful home was interrupted by an angry knock that echoed through every room, and when I opened the door I found Victoria standing beside her sharply dressed attorney while both of them wore expressions filled with confidence and determination. Without accepting my invitation to speak calmly, she stepped inside and declared that she would expose every hidden account connected to my family, insisting that I had stolen money that rightfully belonged to the estate and warning that refusing to cooperate would lead to devastating legal consequences. I listened quietly as her attorney spread thick folders across my dining table and spent nearly half an hour describing lawsuits, financial investigations, frozen bank accounts, and endless court proceedings that he believed would frighten me into submission. Yet I remained completely composed because every threat depended on assumptions instead of facts. When the room finally became silent, I unlocked a secure cabinet and carefully removed a sealed package that had remained untouched for years, placing it gently on the table before them. As I watched their confident smiles slowly begin to fade, the attorney confidently opened the sealed package, expecting to uncover evidence that would support his accusations, but his expression changed almost immediately as he examined the certified documents one page at a time with growing disbelief. I calmly explained that my grandfather had transferred the true family fortune into a private legacy trust many years before my father remarried, making it legally separate from every asset listed in my father's estate and completely beyond anyone else's claim. As the attorney continued reading, he discovered another section that completely changed the situation because the companies and properties Victoria had eagerly accepted were transferred together with every financial obligation attached to them, including business loans, unpaid taxes, pending lawsuits, and contractual liabilities. The profitable investments, intellectual property, and long-term revenue sources had never belonged to those companies at all because they were safely protected inside the trust, leaving Victoria with expensive responsibilities instead of the fortune she believed she had inherited. Victoria stared at her attorney while desperately waiting for him to argue against the documents, but the confidence he displayed only minutes earlier disappeared as he quietly admitted that every signature, certification, and legal requirement appeared valid and fully enforceable. The room became painfully silent as she finally realized that months of manipulation, deception, and careful planning had led her into accepting a collection of debts while the real family legacy had remained completely protected beyond her reach from the very beginning. I gently reminded Victoria that my grandfather had believed character was far more valuable than money because wealth could disappear overnight, while integrity lasted for generations. And I told her that greed often blinds people to the truth. Standing directly in front of them, tears of frustration filled her eyes as she lowered her head, understanding that the empire she had imagined owning had never been available to take. While I quietly gathered the documents, thanked her attorney for reviewing them professionally, and prepared to make one final decision that would shape both of our futures forever. After several long moments of silence, I placed one final folder on the table and explained that I had no interest in revenge because my grandfather had taught me that justice should never be driven by anger or pride. I offered Victoria a simple path forward by proposing an agreement that would allow the struggling businesses to be transferred to experienced managers while the remaining debts could be settled through lawful restructuring instead of years of destructive court battles. Her attorney carefully reviewed the proposal before quietly advising her that continuing the fight would almost certainly end in financial disaster because every legal document strongly supported my position and left very little room for challenge. With trembling hands and a face drained of confidence, Victoria signed the agreement, realizing that the dream she had spent years chasing had disappeared in a single afternoon because of choices rooted in greed rather than honesty. During the following months, I worked with financial experts to stabilize the businesses that still had value, protected the jobs of hundreds of loyal employees, and restored the reputation my grandfather had spent a lifetime building. Walking through the company headquarters again reminded me that true success is never measured only by money, but by the people whose lives are improved because someone chooses responsibility over selfish ambition. Inspired by everything my family had experienced, I established a charitable organization dedicated to helping older adults recognize financial manipulation before dishonest people could take advantage of their trust and kindness. Every seminar we organized and every family we helped became another reminder that the greatest inheritance my grandfather left behind was not his fortune, but the wisdom to protect those who cannot always protect themselves. Looking back now, I realize that patience, preparation, and integrity defeated greed far more effectively than anger ever could, and I hope my journey reminds you that the truth has a remarkable way of revealing itself when the time is right. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.